Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk on taste and smell. My name is Ryan Taylor, and today I'll be taking us through some of the basic neuroscience behind how we taste and smell. And this is in part due to one of the symptoms of COVID-19, which is a sudden loss of both taste and smell. So let's get started with taste. So how do we taste? A lot of us have probably heard that we actually don't have that many tastes, and in fact, we only have 5 tastes, 5 main tastes, which are bitter, sour, salty, sweet, and umami. Now, this is a graphic of the tongue, and you'll see that they kind of put different areas on the tongue of where you may taste certain things. That is in part true. We actually taste everything everywhere on our tongues, but we definitely taste sour things a little bit more on our sides of our tongues, salty a little bit at the tip, bitter at the back, and then sweet kind of in the center, and umami, which is that protein flavor, kind of really all throughout the big center of our tongues. But how do we taste? So taste is not that complicated. Basically, molecules bind to our taste receptors, and they send information down the axons into our brain, through our gustatory cells, into our gustatory cortex. And that tells us what taste to taste, basically. It tells us what taste we are experiencing based on what molecule is binding to that, to the taste bud, to the taste receptors. If you've ever been sick, which I think all of us have, with like a normal cold or whatever, you'll probably notice that most things don't taste that good when you're sick because you can't smell anything. Most of the flavor that we actually experience is smell. So that brings us to our next sense, which is smell. And this one I'm going to go into a little more depth into how it works, just because that way we can talk a little bit more about the ways in which COVID-19 can destroy or kind of eliminate our sense of smell, at least temporarily. When we smell, we inhale something. And when we inhale anything, there's always going to be molecules in that we inhale, and those molecules bind to our olfactory epithelium, to the receptors in the olfactory epithelium, which are up here, and it kind of zooms in down here. You see these cilia, and there are receptors on these cilia, which looks something kind of like this. So our odorant molecule binds to our receptor, and then once it binds, it initiates a cascade of information that ultimately results in a membrane depolarization, which causes an action potential. And action potentials are the ways that the brain sends messages between cells. From cell to cell, we can get these messages along, and then eventually we get to our olfactory cortex. But before we get there, we have to go from our nose, from our olfactory epithelium, up to the brain, to the olfactory bulb. And our axons go through this bone called the cribriform plate, which sends all of our axons, our olfactory axons, up to the olfactory bulb, where they can kind of come together and coalesce and send the messages to our olfactory cortex and other parts of the brain so we can perceive smell. Now, when we talk about taste, we said we only had 5 tastes. But in smell, well, there's actually countless number of smells we can smell. We only have about, we have a limited number of olfactory receptors, probably around 350 or so. But depending on the combination that those receptors are firing and what is being activated, we can actually smell a wide variety more of smells than we have receptors for. So a bit of a recap. Our olfactory sense comes from when odorant molecules bind to the receptors in our olfactory epithelium, which is in the nose. Then there's a depolarization of the membrane, and an action potential sends the information through the cribriform plate to the olfactory bulb. Then once we're in the olfactory bulb, we can either go to the thalamus, which is an important junction in the brain, and then to our olfactory cortex. And this pathway is thought to mediate conscious perception of smell. Or we can go straight to the olfactory cortex, and this pathway is thought to be involved in odor discrimination, emotion, and memory. So how can we lose our sense of smell? Well, the loss of smell is called anosmia, and it is common enough, but it's also becoming, scientists think it's a symptom that could be caused by COVID-19. And they think, well, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done about this symptom, but they think it could happen in 3 possible pathways. The first is just general inflammation. kind of, you're inflaming the olfactory epithelium and you just can't get any molecules to bind. And then we lose our sense of smell through that pathway. The second is that we're targeting those receptors. You know, those odorant molecules, they bind to those receptors. Well, one of the theories, the hypotheses, is that COVID-19 actually targets and destroys those receptors, which prevents us from initiating that information to go up to our olfactory cortex. You may be thinking, oh no, if I get this, will I lose my sense of smell forever? The answer is no, hopefully. The olfactory receptors are actually one of the few receptors in the brain that routinely go through death and rejuvenation. But every 30 to 60 days, we actually completely overhaul all of our olfactory receptors in the olfactory epithelium. The last possible hypothesis that they have, there may be others, but these are the three that they're working with right now, is that there's actually, the COVID-19 actually infects the olfactory bulb, which prevents downstream messages from being sent. This is a little bit of a scarier pathway, because if it's getting into the brain, well, that may mean it can go to other places as well, and not just the olfactory bulb. One of the theories is that if it is infecting the olfactory bulb, a lot of the respiratory issues could actually result from the virus affecting respiratory areas in the brain and not necessarily lungs. Just another theory. So those are three possible ways that we could lose our sense of smell. But to end today's mini lecture, I want us to do a fun taste test. So here are these instructions, and I'll post these on the discussion forum so you guys can follow them. But I want you guys to do a blind and nose blind and eye blind taste test for some willing participant in your household. Could be a sibling, a parent. And I want you to find some foods around the house that you want them to taste. Find a participant. You're going to blindfold them. Then you're going to close their nose. You can either have them hold their nose with their fingers so you sound like this, or you can put a clip. After they're ready to go, you're going to give them food you want them to try without them knowing what it is. So you're just going to put it in their hand and then they're going to try it. Then you're going to record their reactions and have them describe the taste or flavor. If you want a funny response, I recommend trying raw potato. Apparently it is not a great taste, and you're sure to get some good reactions out of them. Well, thank you for listening to my talk, and I look forward to seeing all those reaction videos soon.